Let me make that bigger. They did it. Oh my God. Hello, Detroit Sports Nation. I am Ryan from Sports Carnage. After that game that we just saw, the Lions marched down the field at the end against the Falcons, and I'm in a way better mood than I was yesterday after the Michigan State and Rutgers game. Because what a absurd game from all aspects. All right, you had the play calling, which was still probably a problem. The Lions not throwing it enough, and then when they decided to throw it at the end of the game, it it obviously won them the game. You had Prater missing the field goal, coming back and redeeming himself after the Lions got that fumble, and then redeeming himself even more so at the end with the 48-yard extra point attempt to win, which is something that I don't think I've ever seen. And you'll probably see it again because when a team scores in the end zone, somebody's bound to do something that's unsportsmanlike. But other than that, it was just there's so much drama at the end of the game, and then you even had the absurdity of Galladay's catch before the touchdown, well before they spiked the ball. Like, what are they going to do with the clock, right? I'm sure we all thought that there was going to be something that ended up screwing the Lions, some type of rule where they ran it off 10 seconds or something absurd like that, and they were going to, maybe even just run it off 5 seconds and the game was going to end. Very glad that didn't happen, but I can guarantee none of us knew the rule, and I don't think any of the players or the coaches knew the rule because even in the broadcast booth they were kind of going back and forth about it. And yeah, huge shout out to Todd Gurley for scoring the touchdown when he didn't need to, because if he just goes down after that first down, then the Falcons can kick a field goal and then the Lions lose anyway. But that didn't happen. Much like the Penn State Indiana game yesterday, right, where the running back decided that they wanted to score the touchdown instead of just take the knee and end the game. And then in both cases, the team that had the opportunity to go down and score ended up winning the game. Except in the Lions case, as opposed to the Nittany Lions, we actually scored the touchdown, and it wasn't just gifted to us like it was them. James Sino said Raheem Morris is no longer the head coach of the Falcons thanks to Gurley. Maybe. I mean, that's obviously it wasn't Raheem Morris's fault, right? But it's not like the Falcons played some great game either. And for most part, the Lions didn't even play really well. There was still a lot, just following the game on like on Twitter or Facebook or whatever social media you were using. There was a whole lot of mixed emotions, right? From Adrian Peterson probably getting too many carries for most people's liking, for the Lions not throwing the ball enough until the end, and not letting Stafford, sling it around against a really, really bad Falcons pass defense. There was just a lot to. There's a throughout the entire game. There was always something where you could look at, and it's just like, why is that happening? Why is that happening? Why is that happening? But then at the end of the day, the Lions get the ball back with however much time was left. Hawkinson didn't go out of bounds right on the first play or on the first catch that he had, and it was like, oh, so this is how we're going to lose because we decided not to go out of bounds with no timeouts, and then they ended up getting it done. No, just like I think even a lot of Detroit fans thought Matt Stafford would, or they at least thought that he would give you a chance, and that's exactly what happened. And Kenny Galladay, I don't think he caught a lot of balls, but all the catches that he had seemed like they were huge and they were tough and they were contested. Yeah, 6 catches, which is pretty decent, but it's not some 10 catch game. But 114 yards, 19 yards a catch, and again, all those catches they were tough, they were contested. He was getting hit in the air and then coming down. He was on the sidelines tiptoeing. So it was a really impressive game from him. Obviously, a really impressive game from Stafford. You probably would have liked for him to throw it more, but at the end of the day, he had 340 yards and then just the one touchdown at the end there to Hawkinson. And yeah, absolutely, they did it because of Todd Gurley's mishap. There's no, I don't think anybody would argue with you there. But I mean, sometimes you got to get lucky, and this can make up for the Bears game, right? Where you feel like, hey, the Lions probably should have beat the Bears in Week 1. This is a game that you probably should have ended up losing, but then you win. So the universe, or the football universe at least, seems to balance itself out like that. Yeah, Gurley fantasy owners are happy. I bet they are. And me, I was a Hawkinson fantasy owner, so I was pretty happy too. At the end of the game, they gave him, obviously they gave him that touchdown, which if Gurley just goes down, he doesn't get a chance to get. Said I told my coworker Detroit can be 8-3 when they match up against Chicago in Week 13. I love the optimism. I understand why you say that because the Lions' schedule is very easy. The one thing I'd probably point out though is the Lions. They tend to kind of lose some of those games, and I think that a lot of the teams that are still on the Lions schedule are looking at the Lions. You look at the Colts next week and the Vikings the week after that, and you're probably like, oh, that's an easy win because the Colts and the Vikings aren't very good. I'm sure Colts fans and Vikings fans are looking at the Lions and they're like, oh, hey, we can at least get a win there because the Lions aren't very good. So I do think that you'll have. I don't know if there's going to be any blowout games, but their next 5 games for them to go 8-3 heading into Chicago would be the Colts next week. Then they have the Vikings the week after that. On the road against the Vikings, at home against the Washington football team, on the road against the Panthers, who might have Christian McCaffrey back. By then, obviously we still don't know, but he's at least off the IR. He just still hasn't played. At home against the Texans at home against the Texans, and then they play the Texans game is on Thanksgiving. Sorry. So yeah, at home against the Texans on Thanksgiving, and then they have a 10-day rest I think before they play the Bears. And, I mean, is it possible they win all 5 games? Absolutely. But I still don't think this Lions team is the type of team that's going to go on a 7-game win streak at that point because there are 2 games now. I mean, anything's possible, and you would kind of love it to happen. But they can absolutely be above 500 when they go there. A 6-5, or even if they're 5-6, they'll still be at least in the hunt for the playoffs with the expanded playoff section this year. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about next, just because I was looking at the standings. So right now, the teams that the Lions would be fighting to kind of get into the playoffs with are the NFC East teams. So the Eagles and the Cowboys. They're both bad, but one of them, and I mean maybe even the Washington football team because they beat the Cowboys today. But even so, one of those teams has to make the playoffs just because they won the division, even if they have a worse record than the Lions. But the Lions still have to play them, and if it is the Washington football team that they end up playing, then that game becomes huge. Obviously for a tiebreaker, if God forbid it should come to that. But then you look at teams like the Cardinals who are 4-2, the Rams who are 4-2. And this is not, well, the Cardinals and the Rams haven't played today. And then the 49ers who still have to play, who right now are 3-3 as well. And the Lions just got to 3-3. And they already lost to the Cardinals. Do they play the Rams and the Niners? They do not. I'm sorry, they beat the Cardinals. So they have the tiebreaker against the Cardinals, which is nice. Again, if it would come down to that, obviously the teams in their own division, Chicago's ahead of them at 5-1. The Packers are 5-1 now after their win today against the Texans. And then they have the Lions sitting there 3-3. The Vikings are way behind there. So we're probably not going to win the division. But if we can, obviously stack up against some of these other teams, it's going to be harder because we're playing in a division that does have two of those good teams, and then just some of the teams that we have to face. Like right now, the Bucks are 4-2. The Saints are 4-2 after their win, and the Panthers are 3-4 after losing to the Saints. But those are teams like the Bucks that the Lions have to end up playing, and then the Lions play the Panthers as well. And let me see if there's anybody else. And they already lost to the Saints, so that's a tiebreaker also that they of course don't own. So there's a lot of I don't know. It's just like a lot of mixing in there, and right now it's if you were in the fantasy league where every team was like 4-2 or 3-3, that's kind of what it's like. It's just all jumbled up in the middle there. And these next 5 games for the Lions do paint at least a better picture of moving forward and seeing if they can get a couple of those wins, because I absolutely believe that they can. Even despite some of the issues that we've seen, even from this game where probably DeAndre Swift didn't get enough touches. Again, Matthew Stafford probably didn't throw the ball enough, but and I think even there are times where the defense looked pretty shaky, but then they made some great plays too. Right, you had the Trey Flowers break up on the 4th and 5 that Atlanta went for it instead of taking the 3 points. So again, don't discredit how much Atlanta did to help you win this game. But again, I mean that's the NFL, and that's what's going to happen on a week-to-week basis. Very rarely are you going to do what you did against Jacksonville, where you just absolutely smack down on a team, and then no matter kind of what they do, it's not going to matter in the outcome of a game. A lot of time you do need that luck. Again, Matthew points out here the roughing penalty against the Falcons, where the Lions were, third and goal, and then Stafford got sacked, which would have put it fourth and goal. They ended up calling roughing, and then I think a play or two later, because they reset the downs, of course, and then a play or two later, DeAndre Swift runs the ball in. I don't know that roughing penalty gets called in every game, but you're going to take any of these breaks that you can get. And they gave some breaks too. We had Okuda had the pass interference in the end zone on I think a third down, which set up first down, and then the Falcons were able to punch it in there. So it's a lot of give and take. And today, the Lions got a little bit more take than they gave away in terms of plays that are absolutely going to lose you the game. Derek, shout out to you from Hawaii. It's nice that you're tuning in, and it's probably nice that you're in Hawaii. That might be the only thing that made, this game better is if you could look outside and instead of some of the trees. I don't have a lot of trees around my house, so some of you might be in areas where it's just like big, beautiful fall trees. Not really the case here. I'd say most of the trees are more so dead than they do have like these, pretty red and orange leaves on them. But I mean, if you could look out and see palm trees in the ocean, then more power to you, Derek. It's Carolina. That's what I'm scared about. Yeah, I don't know that Carolina's going to be because you look at their team and they probably shouldn't be this good, but it probably says something about their coaching and their players that they are. Where they're 3-4 now, they had a chance to beat the Saints today, and they tried a 65-yard field goal to send it into overtime, and then their kicker obviously shorted it up. But I mean, their best player and maybe the best running back in the league hasn't played for them for week 7 today, I think. So he hasn't played for them for 5 weeks, and they've still been able to tread water. And he's going to come back at some point. And Mike Davis hasn't really looked good these last 2 games. I think they were more comfortable sitting him just because Mike Davis looked good. He wasn't Christian McCaffrey, but he was definitely serviceable. And then today and last week especially, he didn't look really good. So they might be trying to urge McCaffrey to come back sooner rather than later. Austin says, do you believe the Lions are going to be buyers or sellers because of their record? I think regardless of their record, they would try and be buyers because Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn are still coaching and managing for their jobs respectively. So I don't see in any scenario where they would just kind of give up on that and they'd say, oh, hey, here's Stafford to Dallas because Andy Dalton went down today, so the Cowboys really need a quarterback. Not that they didn't when Andy Dalton was there because he's bad, but they need one even more so now. I don't exactly know what pieces they're going to be looking at acquiring though. They do need pass rush help obviously, but there's not really like, it's not like the NBA trade deadline or the baseball trade deadline where you can get some like real home run hitters. And I mean that might be changing. I think you've seen some bigger trades in the NFL the last 2 or 3 years than maybe you saw in like the 10 years before that. But in terms of like, buying or selling, I just don't know that that's something that would be kind of be possible. With that being said, who would you look to trade for? Well, for me, again, obviously a pass rusher. Specific pass rushers, you don't really know. Ngakoue just got traded to the Ravens, who's somebody that seems like would be a very good fit for the Lions. But he was on the Vikings, and I don't think the Vikings were going to trade him to us, kind of regardless. There are people that think if the Texans, keep losing these games like they lost today, that maybe a guy like J.J. Watt could be on the move. Texans are 1-5, but do you want to pay the price that it takes to get J.J. Watt, a guy that's been injured? Just in the past and recently, he's obviously a great football player, but what do you know there? Yeah, you might just be best served trying to look at some of these bad teams, right? Teams like the Chargers, obviously they wouldn't be looking to trade. Which Bosa do they have? Joey, yeah. So they wouldn't be looking to trade like Joey Bosa. But if you could look at some of the other players on their teams who you think might help you rush the passer, same thing with the Broncos. I don't know if the Broncos ended up winning today, but a guy like Von Miller could be on the move somewhere as well, and that's to me where the Lions would be most likely to try and get some help. Um, and I don't really know who they'd sell off. Like I'm sure they'd want to get rid of Jared Davis, but nobody wants Jared Davis. So at that point, you just have him in like on third downs and try and use him as a pass rusher, and hopefully he doesn't overshoot the quarterback like we've seen so many times. That might be something that we end up doing though. And while they probably weren't the best answers that I could have given you guys on the spot, we might do like a trade deadline show. I actually think that's a pretty good idea. To hop on here, obviously do a little bit more research on who could be moving, just what those contracts look like, what kind of what the price would be, and see who are a couple guys that the Lions could target at the trade deadline and give you guys some more realistic names as opposed to just maybe some of the bigger names that you've seen, Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport, or whoever tweet out that these guys are likely to be on the move or X, Y, and Z team is fielding call for these guys. So I think that's a good idea, and that's probably something that will end up make happening. Here, yeah, don't get too excited. It was only Atlanta. I mean, you got to get excited about every win, right? Especially kind of how it came with the Lions looking like they weren't going to win, where it was almost a near certainty that Atlanta was just going to run out the clock after Todd Gurley got the first down, and then obviously the Lions let him score. He didn't quite realize it, tried to fall down, and the ball ends up crossing the goal line. And again, if that doesn't happen, this is a very different discussion because the Lions are 2-4, and then you're probably talking about like selling at the trade deadline, or we need to fire Quinn and Patricia next week. Um, and instead, you're more optimistic because it is 2 games in a row, and you're back to 500, and we've seen there's a lot of football left. There's what 11 weeks left, 10 weeks left, something like that in the football season. So you look at these teams ahead of you right now in Chicago and in Green Bay, and this is specifically for the division, even though for a wild card berth, which is probably more likely, there's a couple teams ahead of you, and a couple teams vying for the same spots. But in injury here or there could always help you out, right? Like what are the Packers if they have to put in Jordan Love because Aaron Rodgers goes down? Or what do the Bears look like throughout the next 10 weeks if Foles gets hurt and then you have to use Mitchell Trubisky in there? I mean, same thing for Lions too, right? Like if Stafford goes down, they're nothing at all. But I just kind of wouldn't count out only looking at the records and saying, hey, there's still no chance for the Lions to make the playoffs because they are in the thick of things, and in the NFL, one hit or two can either open up an opportunity for a team like the Lions, and it can completely tank a season from somebody. If it's like the Seahawks with Russell Wilson, or Kyler Murray gets hurt or something like that, then I think those are some of the teams that are eventually going to fall off the playoff charts. Said, I didn't know the 49ers signed Ziggy Ansah. Yes, they did, and I mean, good for Ziggy. I'm a little bit surprised that he hasn't made more of an impact since going over there, but I mean, there's obviously still time. There's still time for him, and good for him though. I generally like seeing Detroit players do well other places, like even Ebron. I was flipping back and forth between the Lions and the Lions and the Steelers game, and when I flipped over, I saw Ebron had a couple catches, and for me, I was like, good for him. No, I didn't like him when he was here, but now that he's not here, I don't really kind of care anything about him. And then, obviously still mad that they took him over Aaron Donald, but again, just like when he was here, that's not his fault. He didn't pick himself at 10. Mike says, "Who cares? The NFL is corrupt, and I'm moral." Well, good for you, Mike. I hope you are a man of good morals, and if you don't want to watch the NFL, then that's your business. Nobody can force you to do it. Instead, you can go to church. Go to church and get right. And let me see if I missed any questions. I know I did this one yesterday for Michigan State and Rutgers, and I feel bad because there's only like a certain amount of the comments and the questions that you guys ask that pop up like on the side when I'm reading them. So then I go back and look at it after, and there's like just all these questions that I didn't see in real time, and then I always feel bad because I feel like I missed whoever's question, and sometimes it's a really good question. It's like, oh, yeah, that would have been great to talk about, and then I feel bad, and it makes me feel like I'm not doing my job for you guys. So that is kind of what we have here. Unless you guys kind of want to talk about like what the Lions could have done better, right? Because I think we're all kind of on this high and this euphoria after their win, and again for good reason, right? Stafford looked really good, throughout the whole game, but definitely down the stretch. Kenny Galladay, who the Lions are still trying to figure out if they should pay, had another crazy game against 6 catches, a ton of them contested, 114 yards. Hawkinson obviously scored the game winning touchdown, even if he had that brain fart on the final drive where he didn't end up getting out of bounds. But I think for the day I think he had about 5 catches too, and probably close to 60ish yards. And he's been one of the better tight ends in the NFL this year, quiet as kept. He's not on the level of like Travis Kelce or George Kittle, but he's kind of been right in that tier, but below those other guys, just in terms of like the raw numbers that he's putting out. With targets, with catches, yards, and he's probably even. He might not be up there in touchdowns because you had the guy from like Green Bay who had like 3 touchdowns in one game or something like that. But on a week to week basis, Hawkinson has been one of the more consistent tight ends in the NFL this year. Yeah, today 5 catches for 59 yards and in the touchdown. He's obviously big on that final drive, catching the touchdown pass, and then catching the pass before that, where even though he didn't go out of bounds, he moved the change, and then the Lions were able to spike the ball. Um, and again, probably too many touches for Adrian Peterson. I wish the Lions would use DeAndre Swift more. Uh, in terms of like yards per carry, both of them are actually pretty bad today. Swift was at 27 rushing yards, and Adrian Peterson was at 29. Adrian Peterson did that on 11 carries, and Swift did that on 9. So they're both. Swift was just at 3 yards a carry, and Adrian Peterson was at a little bit over 2.5. But obviously, kind of where they separate themselves is receiving, where Swift had 21 yards on 4 catches, and it was actually 3 on 23, and then one of the catches that he caught at the end. He broke a tackle and tried and spin out, which was probably a stupid decision, and then he got tackled backwards. But on 13 touches, Swift had to do 48 yards, and on 12 touches, Adrian Peterson had 30, and Swift obviously also had the touchdown. So I think with this offensive line and the way that they run block, there's not like you're never going to get a huge, really rushing game from one guy. I mean, Swift did it last week, but he also had the 54-yard rush, where it's like, oh, he just averaged 6 pops a carry and he absolutely tore it up on the ground. But what Swift gives you that obviously Adrian Peterson doesn't is just the spacing that you can use. Right, when Adrian Peterson's in, you're pretty much tipping your play and you're telling them, hey, we're going to run the ball. And when DeAndre Swift's in there, the defense now has to account for both the run and pass because despite the week 1 drop, DeAndre Swift has been good and reliable and even effective as a receiver. One sequence that I really loved today from him was it was probably like a 15-yard carry that got called back because of holding, and then on the very next play, so it's 2nd and 20, Stafford hit him for like a 15-yard catch. Like he checked it down, probably about 5 yards, and then Swift was able to run up 10 yards, and then he got tackled, and he made up, kind of for what he just, for what just got taken away from him, a holding, no fault of Swift's own, obviously, but I really like that sequence from him. Because even in just those 2 plays, it was kind of a microcosm of the different looks that he gives this offense. So other than the Lions, my beloved team, not helping on another team, but the 49ers, I have a soft spot for them. I don't know. I don't really like the 49ers. I like the Steelers, and I don't know why. I think it was just because, like, when I was younger, I liked their colors and I liked their logo. I don't know that I really have a second NFL team. There are people that I like, though. Like, I love Lamar Jackson. I love Kyler Murray. So, in that aspect. Like, I want the Ravens to win and I want the Cardinals to win, but not necessarily because I'm just like a big, Cardinals guy. I just enjoy those players and those quarterbacks. So I don't really have like a team number two for the Lions, but I do have players that I follow that I enjoy when their teams win because usually they play well, and especially if they're quarterbacks. They obviously either fair or not, all the credit gets put on them, and then all the blame does. And I like the Chiefs too. But again, I'm a Michigan State fan, so when Le'Veon Bell went there, I was super excited for them. Maximilian, great name, says, "Would you trade Kerryon Johnson prior to the deadline?" I mean, I would try because Kerryon doesn't do anything for the Lions. But again, it's who's going to take him, right? And who can use him, and who's going to give you any type of draft capital for him. Regardless if it's a 6 round pick or a 7th round pick. So then you kind of look at teams that like who needs a running back that's still good. And for a while, I think a team that made sense. And again, you're not getting like higher than a 6 round pick for a carry on, if that. But I think even trading them to a team like the Bears makes sense because David Montgomery hasn't been good this year. Neither is Tariq Cohen, but they just paid Tariq Cohen, so it means that they want that they're going to use him. Um, so I don't know. Again, like not even the Panthers because you have Mike Davis who filled in well, and then Christian McCaffrey's coming back. So again, you're just trying to look at some of these teams who are like running back depleted, and I don't know that you find many of those because even Seattle, Chris Carson's obviously better than on, and they don't have much behind them. But also a lot of these teams that needed running back help, they drafted a rookie in the 6th or 7th round that that they drafted him for a reason because they liked him, especially if he's still on the team. So maybe even if they haven't gotten like a chance to pop off or gotten an opportunity, that team is going to give that running back an opportunity. A guy like James Robinson, for the Jaguars, he's a real late round pick, but they traded Leonard Fournette and then other guys like Armstead, Chris Thompson, like they just didn't get it done. And then James Robinson came in, kind of took hold of that backfield. Same thing with like Miles Gaskin in, with the Miami Dolphins. Even though they had Matt Breida and they have Jordan Howard, bigger names than Gaskin was, but he's just so much better than those guys that's now their running back. That's the guy that they're playing. So I think the teams that did that are way more likely to give their own guy the opportunities and the carries as opposed to trading for Kerryon Johnson. So if you can trade him and you can get anything for him, go for it. But I don't think the carry-on market, just like the Jared Davis market, is not, it's not bumping right now. It's not high. If you could sign one player to improve our team, who would it be? I mean, I guess you could have signed Antonio Brown, and that didn't work. I don't really know who's still out there as far as free agents go. I know, Snacks Harrison, who was here. He wanted to be on the Seahawks, and then he like declined an opportunity to get on their practice squad. So I mean, he seems not that he'd be necessarily good against the or good for the pass rush because he's not that type of player, but just another guy that you can rotate on the defensive line. I wanted Clowney here, and not that he's a big sacks guy either, but he gets to the quarterback kind of a lot, and is disruptive. But obviously he got picked up by the Titans. So a lot of the guys that I ended up wanting were not here. One of there's an offensive lineman. I forgot his name, but he just got cut by somebody. And even when you're talking about cut players, there's probably a reason they were cut. But he was like a starter for all of last year, and he started 2 of their 4 games this year. I believe he's a right guard. So I just think that those are the guys that you can use on your team to, even if they're not going to come in and start for you, they give you depth on the offensive line and on the defensive line. But in terms of just like one player, I think a lot of the players that we saw were have already been picked up. What about J.J. Watt? I mean, J.J. Watt would be awesome for this team, but what's the price going to be to get him? Like, I don't want to give up a 1st round pick for J.J. Watt because he is older and he gets hurt a lot. And I don't know that this team is a J.J. Watt away from contending for a Super Bowl. They might be a J.J. Watt away from kind of trying to climb back up in the division race, but I don't know that just adding J.J. Watt here and giving up whatever it would take to get him would be worth it in the long run, and really not even in the short term. It might help us. It probably gets closer to like winning a playoff game, but I don't think it get us any closer to winning a Super Bowl, which is kind of the enigma that's with that's with the Lions right now. Is the team, like, there's still a lot of holes and there's still a lot of problems that you can see. So when you talk about like these teams, like the Falcons, right? They're really bad, and the Lions, today showed that they're better than them. But the teams like the Bucks, or even the Packers, the Seahawks maybe, and teams like that, like, how kind of far away are the Lions from really competing with those types of teams? And again, you're always an injury away, right? But you just really don't know. Give up Marvin Jones for a while. I don't know that the Texans would do that. I think the Texans, because they're looking for, well, the Texans are 1-6 after their game today. The Texans would definitely be looking for um, picks back. Like, they wouldn't take Marvin Jones for J.J. Watt. Antonio Brown is a poison on any team that he signs with. Yeah, and like, for me, and Antonio Brown wouldn't be my first choice. He is so good though. And one thing that he does that no Lions receiver does, and shout out to Paul on our Sports Carnage podcast, that you guys can click the link in these little the description is what I should say. In here, link to that page. But one thing that Paul's harped on for like a year has been the Lions receivers don't get any separation. They're like the worst in the NFL at separating from their cornerbacks, or just for whoever's covering them. So when you see, sometimes Stafford is throwing like in these tight windows more often than not, it's because our receivers just can't get open. And while Kenny Galladay is a great receiver, he's great at using his body to kind of turn himself open and get the catch. But he's not great at I'm gonna burn you, or I'm just gonna run past you, or I got some great route running that leave the defender in the dust. And that's something obviously that Antonio Brown is one of the best really that we've ever seen at. But I mean, yeah, there's definitely some stuff there in his head that's not right, which I think scared most of the teams off. I saw a report from, I think it was Pro Football Talk 2 days ago, that said Russell Wilson wanted to bring Antonio Brown on, but the Seahawks didn't want to. So they leaked a report about them being interested in Antonio Brown just because they didn't want to tell Russell Wilson, hey, no, we don't want to bring this guy on. And then, Tom Brady was obviously big in getting him to sign with New England last year, where he played a game and then and then they released him. And he was big in pushing for the Bucks to get him this year. Lions have a lot of cap space. They do have a lot of cap space, which is kind of crazy that they went into the season with so much cap space. And I know just from Bob Quinn's tenure is usually because he likes to go into the season with cap space. So if there's an opportunity to make a trade, you can make it, which is great. But their cap space, again, it was crazy. I think they have like over $20 million in cap space, which for me, I would have used it on Clowney and gave him a 1-year prove it deal for $20 million. And then if it worked out, great. Then you probably could have paid him here. I wasn't going to give him more than 1 year though, obviously. And if not, then it's just a year, and it's not like you're using that cap space for anything anyway. However, again, that time has passed, right? And then you see these guys like Le'Veon Bell sign for, I think, like $1 million, or at the very most 2.5. Yeah, Antonio Brown is going to the Bucks, and he'll probably be ready to play next week, would be my guess. So he's not coming here, is what we should say. But there were guys, and even Antonio Brown's deal, I think it's like $1 million in base salary, and then these different incentives that can bring it up to $2.5 million. And there's, yeah, man, I mean, there's just different things and different players that you look at, and you're like, oh, that could obviously help the Lions out. But again, they already have like they obviously have this committee that they're at least right now committed to at running back. with Adrian Peterson and with Carryon and DeAndre Swift. And I think most of us think that Swift should be the main guy moving forward. But if the Lions don't think that, it really doesn't matter, what we think. And again, as far as like who they could bring in or should bring in, I don't know that there's anything out there on the free agency market, right, that will help them. Except for if a quarterback goes down, right? Do you give like Kaepernick a call if Stafford goes down? But if he's not, then it doesn't make sense to bring him here or to bring in a quarterback here when you have Stafford. But I do think that we'll end up doing a trade deadline show because I like that idea, and it just gives me more time to research guys who might be available, and then guys who not only would be available but would fit the Lions in like whatever type of scheme that they wanted to run. What do you think about Joe Milton start as a Wolverine? I mean, the Michigan looked really good yesterday. Uh, it didn't look like Milton had to do a whole lot. He'll probably get a coming out party of sorts next week against Michigan State because Michigan State's really bad and they don't have any speed on their defense, and Michigan has, it seems like, a lot of speed this year. So if there's a game that you can get Milton comfortable in, it'll be I think the game's in Ann Arbor. It'll be in Ann Arbor with those fast receivers and with against a not very good defense. Well, then you can just let Milton throw the ball around, and it's not going to matter because Michigan's going to win that game by 30 anyway. So then you could get him some confidence, get him some really nice stats where it's like 350 yards passing and 4 touchdowns, and you're not going to be really in any threat to lose the game. And if for some God forbid reason Michigan's almost about to lose to Michigan State, then I think they can just kill them up front. And that hurts me to say, Austin, because I am a Michigan State fan. So I'm not going to read your go blue comments in here. But that's what we have, and we'll do a video after that next week. For sure on Halloween, the Michigan and Michigan State game. And my guess is I'll probably be pretty sad about it, but I'll bring it. And we did one last year, so you can go look at that on our YouTube page, Sports Carnage Podcast. It should be under the playlist or Michigan football reactions, I think. So you can look at that one if you want a preview of how it went last year, or at least a reaction, and then you can kind of tell how sad I'm going to be this year. Except it might be worse than 44-10 was. So that's what we have for you guys today. Before you leave, make sure you do check out our Facebook page, link there, Sports Carnage Podcast. And then, as always, listen to the Sports Carnage Podcast. You guys can find it on Podbean and iTunes. I don't know why I blanked. It's the only really 2 places that we're at. And then you can also find, obviously, some of our stuff on Detroit Sports Nation as well. And then make sure you guys have, like a notification bell for whenever we post. And then also one for Detroit Sports Nation so that you are up to date on all the news, because I guarantee you will hear from Detroit Sports Nation before you'll hear from any other local outlet, because that's just how hard these guys work. So thank you guys so much for joining us. Again, go check out that Sports Carnage Podcast, and I will see you definitely next week, probably in a very more somber state, but who knows, except for all of us. We kind of know what that game's going to be. However, thank you for showing up today, and have a good day. Good weekend.